Guys. Next three lectures are about carboxylic acid and their derivatives, and as usual, I've divided them in two equal parts. Here we have the functional group formulas for the different types of carboxylic acids, and AR represents the aromatic hydrocarbons, and R represents the aliphatic hydrocarbons. So COOH in this way is carbon double bonded with one oxygen and a single bond with the hydroxyl group, or simply we can say COOH is the carboxylic acid functional group, and AR, when it joins with an aromatic hydrocarbon, it will be a aromatic carboxylic acid. Similarly, R represents the aliphatic chain. Same COOH carboxylic acid will be the aliphatic carboxylic acid. Here we have the structure of the carboxylic acids, and as we saw in the previous slide as well, that a carboxylic acid group consists of two very polar functional groups. One is the carbonyl group, and the other one is the hydroxyl group. So the carbon double bonded with the O, or oxygen, is the carbonyl group, and OH, as we all know, is the hydroxyl group. Both of these are very polar groups. Therefore, the whole molecule carboxylic acid, or the carboxylic acid group, also becomes very polar, as it has two very polar functional groups. The diagram on the left bottom represents a typical carboxylic acid, whereas the right one is a carboxylic acid joined with the ester, so that will be a derivative. Next, we have the physical properties of these carboxylic acids. So we can categorize the carboxylic acids in two types, you can say. One is the low molar mass carboxylic acid, or the small one simply. These are usually sharp and sour taste with unpleasant smell or aromas. Whereas the high molar mass carboxylic acid, the ones that have plenty of carbons in them, and high molar mass. A typical example are the fatty acids, which are carboxylic acids with long side chains of carbons. They are particularly important in biochemistry. And the low variety, or the low molar mass carboxylic acids are water soluble due to the hydrogen bonding that is present with other water molecules as well as with each other. Next, we have another physical property, the boiling points of these carboxylic acid, and just due to the fact that we just saw in the previous slide that carboxylic acids can form intermolecular hydrogen bonds, and because they can make these hydrogen bonds, boiling points are at very high temperatures, higher than any other functional group that we have studied up till now. The boiling points of carboxylic acid will be highest, and we can see at the bottom comparison of different hydrocarbons and their boiling points. So the acetic acid, we can see the smallest of the carboxylic acid has a boiling point of 118 degrees Celsius, which is higher than any of the compared, whether it's an alkane like butane, even though it has got 4 carbons in it, boiling points very low. Then we have an ether, ethyl methyl ether, 7 degrees Celsius. Alcohols have relatively high boiling points, but they are still smaller than the carboxylic acids. And the aldehydes and ketones as well have smaller boiling points, or lower boiling points. Next, we have the naming, or the nomenclature, according to the IUPAC system. And first up, we have to determine the parent chain, which is the longest chain, and that chain must have the carboxyl carbon. That is the one that includes the uh, carboxyl group, and that carboxyl carbon will always be numbered as carbon number 1. And for example, we have a 4 carbon chain as an alkane, its name will be butane, but because it has a carboxylic group, so it's a carboxylic acid. So the last E of the name will be replaced by OIC, and the acid will be added at the end. So butane will become butanoic acid. And if two carboxylic groups are present, then we will have to name it dioic acid. And any branch, if it is present, we can simply name the branch before the name of the parent chain as usual. Here we have some examples of the carboxylic acid naming, and the smallest of these is the 2-carbon carboxylic acid. The 2-carbon alkane is ethane, so a carboxylic acid will become ethanoic acid, and a common name, it is a very common acid also known as acetic acid. This one has 3 carbons, so it will be a propanoic acid, but has a branch at carbon number 2, which is the hydroxyl group, so 2-hydroxypropanoic acid. Similarly, this one 4-carbon butanoic acid, a branch at carbon number 3, which is methyl group in this case, so 3-methyl butanoic acid. The bottom two are an example of dioic acids because they have got 2 carboxylic groups each of these. 6-carbon one will be called the hexane dioic acid, and 3-carbon ones, because of the 2 carboxylic groups, will be called the propane dioic acid. Here we have some names and structures of some common and important carboxylic acid. This slide can be important for exam point of view. The smallest one, sorry, I mentioned acetic acid is not the smallest one. We have a 1-carbon carboxylic acid as well, known as formic acid, and its source is from the ants. Acetic acid is a common source is vinegar, and vinegar is usually present in every household. Acetic acid or ethanoic acid, the CH3COOH. Then we have 3-carbon 1-propanoic acid, 4-carbon butanoic, pentanoic, hexanoic, and so on. And one very important one here is palmitic acid, which is the most typical of the fatty acids, and it has got 16 carbons in it to remember, and the source is from the palm oil. Stearic acid is also a very common fatty acid, which has got 18 carbons in it, and the source is from the beef fat. So these are some of the more important ones that I have highlighted. Here we have the benzoic acid derivatives, where the carboxylic acid is attached with a benzene ring. So simple benzene ring with the carboxylic acid attached is what we call the benzoic acid, and the 6-carbon cyclic or cycloalkane, the most typical one, benzene, you guys should be familiar with. If a methyl group is attached at carbon number 3 of the same compound, it is known as toluic acid, and if a bromine is attached with it, it will be bromobenzoic acid. Similarly, iodine attached, it's the iodobenzoic acid, and the last one now, which is important, has got 2 carboxylic groups attached with the benzene ring, so this is called phthalic acid. Here we have the carboxylic acid with a phenyl substituent, and this phenyl group or phenyl compound also was there in one of the previous lectures, I think, when we were discussing the cycloalkanes. Anyways, the phenyl group is basically the same benzene compound, but one hydrogen has been removed from it and it will be replaced by something else. So the typical benzene ring, if we take one hydrogen out of it, it becomes the phenyl group. And if it is attached a 2-carbon carboxylic acid, it will be a 2-phenyl ethanoic acid, ethanoic for the 2-carbon carboxylic acid that is attached here. And if it is replaced by 3-carbon carboxylic acid, it will be 3-phenyl propanoic acid. Some more important carboxylic acid that we encounter in everyday lives, or they are important for us. Some complex carboxylic acids are usually found in a variety of fruits. Very common ones which everyone will be familiar with is the citric acid, which is found in citrus fruits like lemons and oranges. Bacteria in the mild produce lactic acid as a product of fermentation of sugar. So this is a process by which these bacteria basically oxidize the sugars like glucose and fructose, and the end product is lactic acid. Some of this lactic acid is also produced in our body as well. Then we have the tartaric acid, which is used in baking powder, and the pizza dough that you guys will be familiar with, that has got some tartaric acid, which is present in the baking powder. Then we have the malic acid, which is found in green apples, and it gives a sour taste to the green apples. If you have eaten those, you will know that they are a little bit sour than the regular red apples, and this sour taste is due to the malic acids. And fatty acids, which are very commonly found in the human body as well, which you can say is the a small unit that is found in most of the fats, are basically long chain carboxylic acids, and they are found in plants and animal sources, also found in plenty of amount in human beings as well. Next we have the reactions involving the carboxylic acid, and we discussed in the last lectures as well that the carboxylic acids are produced by oxidation of the primary alcohols and of the aldehydes as well. So if we start from the primary alcohol, we oxidize it in the presence of an oxidizing agent. The first product we get is aldehyde. If we oxidize it further, the final product is carboxylic acid. So for the 2-carbon alcohol, ethanol will first produce ethanol, and then the final product will be ethanoic acid, which is the carboxylic acid. Here we have the carboxylate anion formation, and which is the negative ion that these carboxylic acids produce when they are dissolved in water. So all of these behave as an acids simply because when they are dissolved in water, they are going to deprotonate. They are going to give away a proton, and themselves will take a negative charge as shown in the diagram as well. And this is known as the carboxylate ion, and the proton will add up or join with water to give us the hydronium ion, or H3O positive. Do remember that these carboxylic acids are weak acids, and the weak acid, again, definitions and plenty of detail we studied earlier. Those are the acids that dissociate lightly, or they dissociate to a little extent in the water, typically less than 5%. So that is why they are called weak acids, whereas sulfuric acid or hydrochloric acid are very strong acids because they dissociate almost completely or very close to 100% in water. So any carboxylic acid, when put in water, will give us carboxylate ions and the hydronium ions, so which will be the proton H positive joined with H2O water. Next we have the neutralization reactions of these carboxylic acid. As they are acids, therefore they will react with strong bases like NaOH or KOH to form the carboxylate salts. And the process is known as neutralization. Whenever an acid and base reacts, the process is called neutralization. The acid protons will be removed and they will join with the OH negative to give us water, and the carboxylate ions will join with the cations and form the salt, as we can see in the bottom reaction. Any carboxylic acid can join with a strong base. The product will be a salt and a water molecule, and the equilibrium of this reaction will be towards the right side. So a couple of examples of these acid-base reactions, or what we can also call the neutralization reactions. Ethanoic acid, or the acetic acid common name, joins with a very strong base sodium hydroxide, gives us sodium ethanoate, which is a salt plus water. Similarly, benzoic acid can also react with the sodium hydroxide. Sodium benzoate will be the salt, and the water will be produced in this one as well. Now the salts of these carboxylic acids, when they react with the base, their naming or nomenclature, always remember that first we have to write down the cation's name, which is, as we saw in the previous slide, was sodium, and the oic acid in the name of the carboxylic acid will be dropped, and we will have to add ATE at the end of it. So when the benzoic acid reacted with sodium hydroxide, the salt produced will be called sodium benzoate, as we saw in the previous slide. And there are plenty of uses of these salts. They can be used in soap formation, like sodium stearate is an example. They are used for preservatives, for preserving the different types of food for a long period of time. They are also used as an antifungal medicine to kill the fungi, and also used to control the pH of the food. Also, this role is pretty much similar to the preservatives one. Next part of this lecture is mainly about the esters, and we'll start off with their structure and the physical properties. So esters are mildly polar compared to the carboxylic acid that we saw were very polar, and these esters are somewhat water soluble but not a lot, and they are found commonly in natural foodstuffs, and many have a pleasant smell or aromas, like this isomyl acetate have, which is found in the banana oil, and ethyl butanoate, which has a smell or aroma like pineapple. Similarly, isobutyl formate, which has got raspberry aroma. So we can see fruity odor or fruity smells are usually uh, originate from these esters, and they boil at approximately the same temperatures as of the carbonyls, if their sizes are similar with the comparable molecular weight. So if of the same size, carbonyls and these esters have usually similar boiling points. Next, we have the IUPAC nomenclature of these esters. And first off, we need to know that these esters are formed when carboxylic acids react with an alcohol. So these esters usually have two parts. One comes from the carboxylic acid, and the other one comes from the alcohol. So always remember that we have to use the alkyl group as the first name, which is the part which comes from the alcohol. So in the bottom, the blue part comes from the alcohol, so we will name this one first, and second will be the base name for the acid part of the structure, which will have the longest chain containing the C double bonded with the O. So this part will be named second, which comes from the carboxylic acid, and this will be the longest chain including the carbon double bonded with the O. And we have to change the name of this carboxylic acid. OIC acid will be removed, and we have to add OAT or OATE at the end of it. So we have a couple of detailed examples of the naming of these esters. And the first up example, as we discussed in the last slide, that the first name will be the alkyl portion, or the portion that comes from the alcohol. So this one is a 2-carbon alcohol which provides this part. So this will be known as ethyl, and it will come first. Then we have to check the carboxylic acid part, which in this case we can see has got 4 carbons in it, so it came from a butanoic acid, or the 4-carbon carboxylic acid. And we have to change the OIC acid and put a OATE at the end of it, so it will become ethyl butanate, butanoate, sorry, to be specific. Similarly, we have another one. In this case, we have a 3-carbon alcohol part, so it will be called propyl, and the carboxylic acid is 2-carbon part, so it will be called ethanoic acid, and we have to change the oic acid with OATE, so the name will become propyl ethanoate for this particular example. So if we look carefully, naming of these esters is very much similar to naming the salts of the carboxylic acid that we discussed a few slides ago. And this is a typical example of the salt which is formed when the carboxylic acid reacts with a strong base like sodium ethanoate. And on the right side we have got an ester which has got a alcohol part, which is the ethyl, and then we change the name of the acid similarly as ethanoate. So naming of the esters and the salts of carboxylic acid is pretty much similar. And we have another example like 2-carbon alcohol ethyl, 2-carbon carboxylic group ethanoic acid, but we have to change it oic acid with the ethyl ethanoate to name this particular ester on the right side. And the naming is similar to this salt which is formed from carboxylic acid. So this whole process of ester formation was described by this scientist Fischer. So we call it the Fischer esterification, where the carboxylic acids reacts with alcohol to produce the ester, and the other product is water, and the reaction is usually catalyzed by a strong acid. So any carboxylic acid, when it reacts with the alcohol, the product will be ester and water in the presence of a strong acid as a catalyst. So we have an example of this Fischer esterification or the ester formation reaction. So propanoic acid is the 3-carbon carboxylic acid that is being used here, and the smallest of the alcohol, 1-carbon alcohol methanol. As we saw in the previous slide, strong acid is required. Also, high temperatures are required for this process, and the product is an ester methyl propanoate plus water is also produced in these Fischer esterification reactions.